Everybody, this is Dream, and today we're going to do our breakdown of the National Football League Week 6 main slate on DraftKings. So, particularly on the slate, these are all the games that start at 1 o'clock and 4:30 on Sunday. So let's go ahead and get into it here. So, at quarterback, oh, sorry, before I get started, can you guys smash that subscribe button and hit that like button on this video? Really do appreciate it. With that said, let's get into quarterbacks. So, we got Josh Allen as top option. Now, Josh Allen has been extremely solid this season for Buffalo. As you can see, he's had some really solid games week after week, and he's been extremely good all season long, throwing lots of touchdowns, lots of yards in most games. The only game he really didn't was against Baltimore, but he still ended up with 25 fantasy points. And his price is pretty fair for this particular matchup here against Kansas City, who has not been good defensively on the season. And so I do like him in this matchup. He's been extremely good, and Kansas City has not been able to stop anybody, and so I think he's the top overall play. He's the guy that I'm going to try to utilize in my lineup as well. The next guy I'm going to mention here is Geno Smith for Seattle against Arizona. He's really been consistent this season in the last 3 games, especially. He had one game bad against San Francisco, but of course they're a good defensive team. Arizona is not a good defensive team, and I look for him to have a really solid game here, just like he's had the last couple of weeks, really throwing the ball well, really getting in a groove, and scoring a lot of fantasy points. As you can see, they've scored 32, 48, and 23 actual points in the last 3 games, and he's been over 20 fantasy points in all of those games. His price point is too cheap for that type of production, and so he's a great value option here on this particular slate. Tom Brady is another guy I really like here against Pittsburgh, who Pittsburgh can't stop anybody. And Brady, after the first couple weeks where he didn't play very well, he's starting to come around to his own, starting to get back more to what he's normal. I think his private life stuff got in the way early in the season, but now he's kind of in a groove. He's been great in his last few games. Also, one of the reasons why we know Kansas City's terrible, because he finally had his breakout game against them on the season, throwing 3 touchdown passes, having his best quarterback rating on the season. Pittsburgh is another team that just, guys do well against, and he's a good player. He's going to have some of his good options available at wide receiver as well, like Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. And also with Fournette finally having a breakout game, look for him to have a good game as well. So I think overall, Tom Brady is in a great spot against a bad team that he should be able to carve up and have a really solid game against. He's really going to be a better option here. So he's a pretty safe price as well at $6,300, and he's just a great option. Then we're going to look at Kyler Murray for Arizona against Seattle. Now, Seattle's defense can be a little bit difficult sometimes, but Kyler Murray's been playing great, and he's really gotten to a groove. Even though they're not winning all of their games, he's a fun quarterback to watch. His price point here is pretty fair for his production. He does have a little bit of risk here, but, he's not overtly bad, and so I really do like him in this matchup. I'm probably not going to use him, but I still think he's a good contrarian option off of Josh Allen if you really need that. And he would be a pretty decent choice at this position. Now, the other guy that I'm going to mention, but I'm not recommending really, is Patrick Mahomes. Now, here's the thing about Patrick Mahomes. He's been pretty solid this season, but he's had a couple games where he wasn't as great against like the Chargers and the Colts. But here's the problem. He's about the same price as Josh Allen, and Buffalo's defense has been pretty solid. And quite frankly, he's just a weaker option on this game. Now, I don't hate him because he's Patrick Mahomes, but he is a little bit risky, and so to me, Josh Allen is a lot safer. Same goes for Lamar Jackson. It's kind of a same situation. He's been really solid most of the games. He's had a couple off games, against Buffalo being one of them, in fact, from Mahomes' perspective. But he's a solid option. He's just going up against a really tough defense who's been good against quarterbacks, so I don't love him as much as Allen, who's just in a very nice spot. But, they're both contrarian options off Allen if you want to go that way, but I just think that they're the best. He's the best option overall. At running back here, so my top overall running back, and it's not close, is, Stevenson for the New England Patriots against Cleveland. He has been really good the last few games. He is now the main back. He wasn't before week 5, and as you can see, he really broke out in this week 5. he's going to get 15 to 25 rush attempts in this type of game. He also gets some targets through the air, and he's going to have the opportunity to get 20 fantasy points. Quite frankly, he's just too cheap. He was too cheap last week, and he's too cheap this week, and so I think he's in a good spot here. He's my favorite option at running back, simply because of his price point. A couple other value options I'm going to look at first here is see here, how much is he? Kenneth Walker, a third for Seattle. He should be the primary running back now for this team. Now, we don't know if he's going to get a ton of rush attempts, but he's been pretty good so far this season and very limited access. And so, we're looking for him to get 10 to 15 fantasy points to pay off here. His price has come up a little bit, but he's still a pretty good value option on the slate. I've got a couple more value options here. Mozart for Miami. Now, he is questionable, but if he does play, then he'll be a guy that I really do like at this position, at this price point. He's been running the ball about 15 to 20 times a game the last couple games, and he should be the feature back if he does end up playing. And I think he is a guy that I will like in this matchup, especially with the weakness at quarterback and the fact that Minnesota is not a great defensive running team. A team good against the run, rather. And then one other guy, A.J. Dillon for Green Bay. He has been kind of disappointing this season, but overall, he just needs a situation where he can kind of break out, and this is a pretty decent option for him. And so if you want a Hail Mary approach, he's your guy there. Let's go ahead and look at the top higher options here. Barkley for the Giants against Baltimore. Now, both these teams are going to run the ball quite a bit, and obviously he's a guy that runs the ball a lot. He has some pretty solid upside in this matchup, despite the fact that Baltimore does tendency to have a pretty good run defense. They haven't been that great so far this season. They're 17th, so I think he's in a pretty good spot. He should be able to get the 15 rushes for 100 yards and a touchdown type situation, and if he can do that, then you can see that he'll get somewhere between 15 and 25 fantasy points. If he does play, obviously. Then Joe Mixon, another guy I really like here for Cincinnati against New Orleans. Now, these two, he's a kind of he's a guy that gets some targets, which really helps him in the points production aspect. He hasn't been ideal this season, but I still think he's got a good opportunity here to have a good game, and I'm looking for him to get around 15 fantasy points in this one. Then we're going to look at Alvin Kamara, who is finally back for New Orleans officially. And in the last game, he finally broke out, and he had 23 rushes for 103 yards. I think a similar situation can happen with him this week, especially because he gets some targets to the air. And so he's a guy that I definitely like in this matchup against Cincinnati. Even though Cincinnati's defense is pretty decent, I do think he's a good option in this on the slate. And then, of course, Mr. Fournette, who finally broke out last week, and he's got another nice plus matchup here where he can have another big week. Obviously, his price is higher than it had been because it came down a little bit due to his production. But overall, I think he is in a great spot, and it's just, he could have another big game where he gets a lot of, gets a touchdown and stuff. Now, he also has some reception yards and receptions in the last 3 games as well, which is really helping his stats. So I think at the low end, he'll get 12 to 15 fantasy points. High end, he'll get in the 25s plus territory. So that's what I got at running back. At wide receiver, we have quite a few good options. So I'm just going to go through them kind of randomly here, just the way I have them written down. Tyler Lockett, if he does play, he's going to be a top option here. His price is too cheap for his production. He's been playing great, and Geno Smith really likes him. And he should get targets, plenty of targets, and he's a touchdown potential in this matchup where they should score a pretty decent chunk of points. Then we're going to look at Rondale Moore for Arizona. Now, he does have a little bit of a tougher matchup, but he's just started playing back. And the first game, he didn't get a lot of targets, but in the last game, he did. And I look for him to get more targets and a nicer matchup than in the first 2 weeks, in the first game where he really felt good. And his price is just very cheap. Obviously, he's a little bit boom or bust here, but he's got a 7 to 8 target window, and he has touchdown potential in this game. And so I do like him in this matchup. He is kind of a secondary / Hail Mary type of situation, though. DK Metcalf for Seattle is another guy I really like here. I think Geno Smith's going to be able to throw the ball to him quite well. He's been really consistent the last 3 weeks. Him and Lockett are a great 1-2 duo for them, and I really do like him in this matchup. Then we're going to look at Olave for New Orleans. he's been playing pretty consistent throughout the season so far, and if he does end up playing, he's a guy I really do like here. He doesn't really get the targets now as much as he was early in the season, but he still has the touchdown upside, and I think he's a guy that if he does end up playing, he's going to be somebody I really like on this particular slate. Then we look at Diggs for Buffalo. He's obviously the top option for Buffalo. He's been having some really big games, though he's had a couple of games that are kind of middle of the road. But this is the type of matchup where I think he's got an opportunity to have a really massive game. Kansas City defense is more similar to Pittsburgh's defense on when it comes to and Tennessee's defense against the pass this season. And so I look for him to have another 25 plus fantasy point game. Then we're going to look at Kupp for the Rams. Now, he's also questionable, so this is a little bit irritating, but he is the most consistent guy on this slate, and he's got a nice plus matchup here against Carolina, who hasn't been able to do anything against wide receivers so far this season, and so I do love him on this particular matchup. Then we're going to look at Chris Godwin for the Tampa Bay, who is also questionable. I know there's several questionable guys. But in the last 2 games, he's been extremely good. He didn't play for a few games because of injury, but now he's back, and he's going to be a top option if he does end up playing in this game. He should get somewhere between 12 and 15 fantasy points on this matchup. If not, maybe a little bit more if he can score a touchdown. Deebo Samuel for San Francisco is a great option here. He's been playing pretty well lately. He's one of the few guys on San Francisco I like, and he's been averaging about 15 fantasy points a game, but really somewhere around 12 to 15 is a good option for him in this particular matchup. That's what I expect him to get. He's going to get the targets. The big issue with him is that he doesn't catch enough balls like that he gets thrown his way, and that's part of his problem. He would score 20 fantasy points every week if he could just catch more than half of the targets that he gets thrown. So we'll have to see what he can do in this game. Obviously, he's a little bit risky, but he is a guy that I do like in this matchup. Jamar Chase for Cincinnati, he's a top option for this particular game. He's been pretty good lately. He's never had a bad game, really, but he's only had one breakout game against Pittsburgh. And so I look for him to have a potential for a big game like that in this particular matchup. Tyreek Hill. Now, obviously, Miami is going to be having their third string their third string quarterback in Skylar Thompson in this one, but he's been pretty solid throughout the season. He only had one game against Buffalo where he didn't do great. Again, Buffalo is a pretty good defensive team, so this is a type of matchup where I do like him in it. I think that Skylar Thompson is going to look for him to try to get him the ball to make plays. And so that's the type of situation you want a wide receiver like Hill in. Just work and you make plays, and that's the guy where you are going to rely on to try to win this game along with the running back. Mike Evans at Tampa Bay is another guy I really like here. Brady's found his groove, and Mike Evans is going to be the guy that Brady relies on. As you can see in the last 2 games, he's been really solid. His price point is actually pretty fair for what he does, and so I do like him in this matchup here. And so he's my favorite play from Tampa Bay when that comes to that. And the tight end position, we have 4 guys to mention here. Tyler Higbee. Now, he was good last week. He's been consistent on the season. He is questionable, so you do have to check to see if he plays. But if he does play, he's my top option at this position. Mark Andrews for Baltimore is obviously a good option. He's been good every game except one against Buffalo. Like I told you about Buffalo's defense being tough, making it hard for anybody who goes against them. But he is a safety valve for Jackson, and he's a good option on the slate. And a good matchup against the Giants. Then we're going to look at Kelsey, who's in a tough matchup here. But if anybody on the Kansas City Chiefs can get through the Buffalo defense, it's going to be Kelsey, who's had some really big games this season. And then finally, Zach Ertz for Arizona against Seattle. He's been really consistent this season, and he's pretty good value play. If Higbee is out, then he's going to be my favorite value play at that position. Then for the defenses, we have 4 teams to take a look at. The Rams against Carolina. They've been pretty solid this season. They haven't had a huge game, but they, if we can keep them around 10 fantasy points a game, that's going to be okay. The Packers, I really do like them in this week. They've had some really good games this season. They've had a couple that weren't great, but they're in a plus matchup against the Jets, and I think they're a solid play. My favorite play, though, is the Buccaneers against Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh is trash. Buccaneers defense has big upside against bad teams, and so I do like them in this one. And then finally, the 49ers against Atlanta. They are also in a great spot here, where they've had some really massive games, and they're just really solid. So with that said, thank you guys for liking, commenting, subscribing. If you have any comments or questions, feel free to leave them below. And thank you. Please smash that subscribe and like button, and have a nice day, guys.